Hey there, Dominic here with an introduction to component mode and item mode in Modo. When you open Modo, you have an untitled scene, as you can see here in the item list in the upper right corner, which contains an empty mesh item, a camera item and a directional light item. You can select these by clicking in the item list on them, and you can also select multiple ones by, for instance, clicking on mesh and control clicking on directional light, and you see in properties each time the properties for those selected items become available. So directional light, mesh. I can click in the viewport in item mode to deselect everything, or I'm going to press Ctrl Z to undo, press escape, it also clears my selection, and I can shift click, click and shift click to select everything in between. And now you see in the properties I have my camera properties, directional light, mesh properties and so on. So escape. Now what exactly is item mode and component mode? So when I select this in the item list, now I have selected a mesh item named mesh. I'm going to deselect it again. You see that it is grayed out, this name. This means that this mesh item actually contains no data. So you see there is absolutely nothing in this scene. So in order to give it data, I have to create a mesh, and I can do that, for instance, by clicking on this cube icon, and I'm going to control click. You see these green lines appear, and this will add a unit cube. So control click and you see a unit cube to this item container, which is named mesh. I can give this item a name, a different name. So when it's selected, click on it, and I can serve, for instance, my cube, or I could right click on it and select rename. Does exactly the same thing. So what has happened? I have, with that item container, which was there when I opened Modo, I have added geometry to that item. When I'm in item mode, I can move that item like so, and in its properties you will see that its position XYZ have been set to a certain position. I can reset it, for instance, by clicking reset over here, and reset position or rotation or scale or shear. I'm going to select all. It resets all manipulations that I did in item mode. Now what if I want to edit this mesh but not that item container? Well, then we have components, other component modes. I could, for instance, click on vertices, and now I can start manipulating several the vertices. So I can select a vert by clicking over it, and I want to add to that selection. I can still hold the left mouse button down and paint a selection, so I'm still holding down the left mouse button. When I let go of the mouse button, what I have done right now, and want to add to that selection, I have to hold down shift. If I don't hold down shift, I'm starting a new selection, like that. So Ctrl Z to undo. When to add to that selection, hold down the shift key, and now I can, with each click, add vertices to my selection. Or when I want to subtract, hold down the control key, and I'm subtracting from that selection. I can also middle mouse button, control click to deselect, shift, middle mouse button, like that. I'm not going to go further about selections, there are other videos about that, but I can do the same in edges mode. So when I hover over it now, the edges highlight, so paint selects a selection of edges, polygons, like that. Now for instance, when I want to modify this geometry, I could bevel it, and with this selection it will operate only on the selection. When nothing is selected, then it will operate on everything. So if I press the B key now to bevel and click in my viewport and drag it, apparently nothing is happening, but like this you see it gets shifted because nothing is selected. Everything got transformed by the bevel. But when I make a selection and press the bevel now with the B key, activated by clicking the viewport, now you see it only operates on that selected polygon. When I press the shift key and then click again to reactivate that bevel, I can activate a new bevel like that. So what I've done now with these operations was in polygon mode, so I've edited the content of this my cube item. But you see over here that item is still at 0, 0, 0 position. Even if I move it, I'm pressing W and I move this geometry, you see the position of that item is still 0, 0, 0. And when you press the O key to go to your visibility options, press visibility, you can say show pivots and show centers. I can set it to none, then nothing will be visible. I can set it to selected to only show the pivots and the centers of selected items, or all, so show all pivots, and if I say show all centers, even from items that are not selected. More often selected is a good choice. So now you see the center and the pivot, which are at the same place right now, of this my cube item, and it's still at the center because I have not manipulated this my cube item. I have manipulated its contents. And this means that when I, for instance, control click on this sphere, control clicking on the sphere will add the geometry, the sphere geometry, in the same item container that is being selected. So my cube item was selected, control clicking added this sphere geometry to the same item that this cube geometry belongs to. So when I go to item mode now and press the W to move, now you see both will move because they are in the same container. They are not separate. They are separate meshes, they are not connected, but they are one item. And you see now in item mode, by moving it, item position has been changed. So this, in item mode, you're going to manipulate position, rotation and scale to populate your scene, and you can animate this, of course, over time. I'm going to press spacebar to drop my tool, press spacebar again to clear my selection, and in component mode I'm going to manipulate my geometry. And for instance, I could make this one mesh. I'm selecting a face over there, a face over there, by shift clicking, right click on the selection and bridge, press in the viewport, press the spacebar to drop my tool, and now you see when I double click, this is one continuous mesh. I could go into sub D by pressing the tab key. This is one continuous mesh, and this was actually sub D already when I created it. So select it, press the tab key to go out of sub D, deselect it everything by clicking in the viewport, tab key again, and you see I have one mesh. So just wanted to show you that you don't have to have one single connected mesh item, connected mesh in an item container. You can have several pieces of meshes in one item. So items are for animation, populating your scene. Even if you're rendering a still, you are going to manipulate your items to populate your scene. It would not make a lot of sense, especially for animation, if you were going to place your geometry to populate your scene in component mode, because you see its center stays over there. See, the center, the position is not being changed when I'm changing the position of the components. Again, with this sphere, so you could say, well, this is a cube and this is a sphere. Actually, that's would be incorrect. This is a mesh item which contains geometry which is separate meshes which kind of look like a cube and a sphere, but it's just the same geometry for this mesh container. Might be a bit confusing in the beginning when you start using it, but after a while it becomes pretty straightforward. So you see, a mesh item can have different separate meshes and at different places. When I go to item mode and set, for instance, reset over here position, you see the center has gone to its original position 0, 0, 0, but actually it contains several data which are have been transformed to different positions. So again, I could move this, and when I'm in item mode, I have Control Z undo. No, oh yeah, I've not selected it here, so I did not see my center. When it's selected, I see my center. So you see the item's center is at the center of the world, but the data it contains is off the center. Now, when I want to add a new item, I could click over here and add all kinds of different items, and I'm going to choose mesh. So now I've added a new item, and again it's grayed out because it does not contain any data. Or I could shift click one of these icons. When you hold down shift, you see a plus sign, and this means that it will create, when I click shift on the cylinder, it will create a cylinder mesh item, cylinder mesh in an item named cylinder. So it's a new item that has been created. When I press now Control on the cube, it adds the cube in the same layer that was active. So in the layer that is named cylinder, but as you can see, when I go to component mode, double click that cube mesh to select it completely, press the W key to move it. So you see this item, which is named cylinder, actually contains this geometry. And a peculiar thing in modo is, if I deselect my items altogether, that my last selected item stays active, which can be a bit problematic at times, because you see you have nothing selected, and you would expect when you do an operation like scaling, so press the R key to scale, that would not do anything, but my last mesh was active. Personally, I think this is a bug. I don't know if this is a feature or a bug. You know what they say, when it's not a bug, then it's a feature, but I find this to be confusing. For instance, same with the cube. I've selected my cube over here, or when I deselect everything and go to item mode, I can select it like that. So this my cube item is selected. When I click in the viewport in item mode, it deselects it. You see it isn't highlighted anymore, and this isn't highlighted anymore. But pressing the D key, for instance, to smooth subdivide it, you see it was active. So this can be a bit confusing. So you have to make sure that, and even when I select my camera, you see this last mesh item, the last mesh item that got selected always stays active. So I'm going to submit a bug report about this, because right now when I select a camera item, and I can make it visible with the O key and show camera, you see my camera item is selected. The last mesh item that I had selected will be active still, even if I've selected my camera. So pressing D key to smooth subdivide, you see my last mesh item does get subdivided, and this is actually something that I don't want to happen. But I hope I've been clear about the difference between item mode and component mode. Over here, when you right click on this item, you can also set the selections to pivot. Now when I select this, it sits over here one pivot. When I set it to center and select it, you see one center in item mode. This is not a tutorial about actually centers and pivots, but just about the difference between item mode and component mode. So an item is a container which can be manipulated in order to populate the scene and to animate it. And in component mode, that container can contain all sorts of mesh data which is connected or not. So I hope this wasn't too confusing, and this was Dominic. Bye for now.